What's up guys, so this is gonna be a very quick and easy tutorial, and it's gonna be about rendering stuff in ZBrush. So for some reason that's a question I got a lot, is how I render my stuff, what kind of matcap that I use, what my settings, all of this. And it's honestly pretty easy, so I thought I could just make a quick video, show everything, share the matcap, and yeah. So in this video I will show you how I set up my canvas in ZBrush. I will show you the matcaps, the lights, my rendering parameters in ZBrush, how to export all the passes in Photoshop, and then compose everything for the final picture. I'm not saying this is like the way of rendering in ZBrush. This is just what I do. I personally like rendering in ZBrush. I don't use Keyshot. I like the way it looks. I'm not striving for like hyper realism. I'm trying to show just as much sculpt as possible, and I think ZBrush does a perfect job with it. So yeah, it's just how I do it. I think it's pretty fast, and hopefully you'll learn something. Yeah, also in this video I'm gonna use this demonic chair that I made a long time ago, and yeah, I basically use this setup for everything I do. Everything in my portfolio uses this setup, this render, so you will see a lot of my stuff with the same kind of look. So obviously, again, it's not supposed to be the perfect way, but you can always adapt. You can always change things, change settings, just make it your way. But yeah, this is just gonna be the way I use it. So yeah, let's jump on ZBrush. Alright, we're in ZBrush now, and I'm using the standard UI for clarity reasons. And the first thing I notice is this gradient in the background, and this is not very convenient to work, but also to render stuff. So personally, I just want to remove it, and so I will go to here, auto fit window size, new document, so it takes the whole screen, and also remove the range to 0, put it to 0, and now it's nice and flat, and it's gonna be much convenient to work with. Also, if you want to make sure this is default and it's there every time you launch ZBrush, you just have to press save as startup document. So now this is gonna be like that all the time. Another thing to know is it's not because you don't have the frame anymore that you can't rotate something on screen. Let's say you have like a huge object like this, you can still have the safe frame here. So you can still manipulate things even though it's completely zoom in. So that's good to know. Alright, so now I'm loading my demonic chair. What a beautiful name. What you see here is actually the size of the picture that you render. If you want something bigger, personally, this size is fine for most of my portfolio renders, so I like it because it's fast as well. But it can happen where you want something way bigger, you want like a really high res picture, or you want to render it higher res and like scale it down if you want to retain as much detail and stuff like that. So I will just show you how to make it really fast, but I think it's just going here, cranking up the size here. You can uncheck this if you want like an even proportions, but if you crank this up and then resize, it's gonna blur everything. Yeah, and now I'm gonna change the color of the background so it's easier to understand. If I go here and zoom out, you can see what's happening. You see, this is actually now the size of your picture. Visually, it doesn't feel like it's big, but it's actually big. So if you render your object in this frame now, it's actually gonna be the proportions that you set here. It's also a bit slower because obviously he's rendering this guy, but he's much bigger in reality. So yeah, it's up to you. You can do that if you want to render something bigger than the canvas. That's how you do it. But let's just use the regular canvas because it's faster and it's pretty big, honestly. I mean, if you have a big screen, I guess. And Another thing I want to make sure is go on draw and check align to object. Because as you can see, if I go on the left, it's stretching. The perspective is like going kind of right. Same thing here on the right side, the perspective stretches. It basically deforms it based on where it's placed. You know, there's like a perspective applied. So yeah, if you check align to object, it's now gonna face the camera no matter where it is. Very convenient if you have multiple objects. And then I'm gonna place this guy. Also, this line is not gonna render. Don't worry about it. All you care is the border of the canvas, not the line. Alright, so let's grab a nice angle where I want my object. There's not enough perspective right now, so I'm gonna crank up to like 90. There we go. So this feels pretty good. Now I'm gonna apply my matcap. If you don't have the matcap, it's pretty easy. You can load it here. You can just press load and go where you want. But you can also drop the matcap in Z startup material folder, and you restart ZBrush and it should be there. All right, so, and then you just find a view. You just find a nice view, something you like. So let's try. There we go. This feels pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna stick with this. Okay, and once you find the view, let's jump to the next step. Okay, so now what I want to do is go on light and change the direction of the light. So if I move this here, as you can see, nothing happens because I'm using a matcap which already has light informations in it. So I'm gonna switch to a standard materials, those in the bottom, so just like a basic one. And now if I move this, you can see how it interacts with the light. It's easier to know what to do. Actually, even some people use that sphere in their UI somewhere just to like change on the fly when they sculpt. You know, it's pretty convenient. So what I want is something kind of like top left. That's what I like. Something like this. And I will leave everything as default. And now I'm going to the render. And let's just try a render with default settings, see how it looks. Okay, that sounds pretty good. This is where the light is gonna hit. Have a bit of shadow here. Actually, I would like a bit of shadow in this angle, so I might tweak that a bit. Maybe the light a bit higher, more on the left. Let's try again. Okay, perfect. I get some shadow in this corner. This looks pretty good to me. So what I'm gonna do now is switch back to the matcap, and we're gonna tweak some render. So one thing here is in the render properties is I have shadows but no ambient occlusion, so I'm gonna turn this on. And in BPR shadow, I'm gonna put this GS strength to maybe 0.9. I don't want to go all the way to 1 because with the AO it's gonna be too dark in the shadows. Okay, let's see. So now with the AO it takes a bit more time, but it's not too bad. Okay, so this is how it looks with the matcap. Okay, so personally the settings that I use are pretty straightforward. In raise I go to up to 100. The thing is, if you go that high in raise, you can't really have that much resolution. So I have to drop this. So usually I go to 1000 because it's easy to remember. 100 raise, 1000 res. This I think is a good balance. It's not gonna look as sharp. It's gonna be a bit blurry technically, but it still should be. It should still look pretty good. Yeah, as you can see, it's like kind of blurred a bit, but that's expected. Here you see a bit of like stepping, but because we dropped the resolution. So if you want something really high res, of course crank up the res, but it's also about how fast you can make those. So personally for me, this is like perfect in terms of like speed, quality. So that's what I do. 100 res, 1000 res, and then what I do is I crank up the angle from 120 to 150, but I think 120 should be good here. And what the angle is it's gonna soften your shadows. It's gonna make your shadows more like a skylight, you know. And the more angle you have, the softer it is. There we go. So that's pretty much how I expected it to look. As you can see, the dark parts are not too dark. You can still see a bit of like highlights and details. You have a nice cavity happening, but it's not getting like too black, you know. It's still pretty good. And also, as you can see, the stepping is gone because it's softer, so it's not as problematic. So that's why I like this setting, because it's pretty fast, looks pretty good. So yeah, so now we can save this light. I think that's the first thing we should do. And let's save this as main light. And let's work on the rim light now. So to do the rim light, it's kind of a different process. So let's go back to a basic material. And what you want to do is actually click on the sphere. If you click on the sphere, the light goes behind. And we want to crank up the intensity to the maximum. One thing I don't want as well is the ambient, because you don't want any ambient for a rim light. You just want like a nice spotlight effect. And I'm gonna place this guy in the opposite direction, so bottom right, something like this. I keep exactly the same settings. Like I said, make it easy. I think it just works fine. So let's render this as well. Before I had like a slightly different angle for the rim light, but honestly, it's so minor that I just like do it very simple now. I just like have to have everything streamlined and faster. There we go. So this looks pretty good as well. So let's save this light now. This one is gonna be the rim. Okay, so now we have our two lights. So if I go back, oh, one thing as well is when you save this light, it saves the settings as well. So that's convenient. So let's go back to our main light and our main matcap. And now we should have the first render we did before without having to retweak anything. Perfect. So, okay, let's export those, because I think we have everything we want. So BPR render pass, here you can see everything that ZBrush generates from that render. So shaded is the main render that you want. Depth is obviously for the depth of field and having blur and things like this. Shadow, you can export this pass if you want to apply certain effects. Same thing for the AO. It can be useful if you want, I don't know, like brown AO or something. Personally, like I said, I like to have everything simple. So all I do is I export the render. Actually, let me delete those. This is from a previous test. So main render, I export the depth, the mask, and that's it. But yeah, so now that I have these three passes, I need to do the same thing for the rim. So I'm going back in my rim. I rendered the rim pass with a basic material, so keep that. Render. And since we already have the depth and the mask, we don't need to export all of those because it's exactly the same view. So all we need is the shaded, which is the rim light. So we're gonna call this guy rim. All right, so now we have all the passes that we need. That's pretty much it. Now all we need to do is compose all of those in Photoshop. One thing that I could mention though is you don't have to render only one matcap. If you want to do specific effects, you can always render other stuff. Like I know some people like to render the reflection map, for example. I will just do it for fun to like show you a bit what I mean. But basically, you can render any matcap that you want, create your own matcaps and really compose them to have different effects. But let's just do this one just for fun. And export this guy as reflect. All right, let's jump on Photoshop now. All right, so now we're in Photoshop and I have opened all my passes. So the first thing I want to do is go on the rim light and copy this pass and paste it on my render. So if I do that, go on screen mode, because everything black is going to be transparent. That's why I rendered it with a standard material, so it just shows the white and no light information from the matcap. And I want to level it a bit because it's too soft. So what I want is at the bottom here, I don't want something too sharp like this. I want kind of like an in-between where it starts to fade a bit. Like here it's pretty nice. It's not sharp, but it's doesn't take everything. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with it. Another thing you can notice as well is there's no anti-aliasing. There's a lot of stepping, but the mask should take care of this. As you can see, the mask here has no stepping. It's pretty clean. So I'm gonna copy the mask and paste it on top of everything. So now I want everything white to be a selection. So to do that, it's very easy. You can go on channels and click in this little wheel. And what it does, it selects everything that's white, and from white to the range to black. You know, it's not just pure white. It takes everything in the range. So it will give you transparency as well. And I can unhide this, but I still have the selection. So now if you press Ctrl-Shift-C, it's gonna copy everything in the selection from all the layers, and then Ctrl-V. So now I have this layer here, and I can put any background behind. And as you can see, I have the rim and the render together. If you want to remove a bit of that line in the side, you can just erase it, honestly. Sometimes I do that. I just erase from the rim light. Like, I don't hesitate to go here and be like, nah, I really don't want any light here. There you go. I wouldn't hesitate to do it. Or you can try to have a rim that is just more on the right side and doesn't hit anything, but don't hesitate to tweak anything. And copy, Ctrl-Shift-C, paste. And now it's more clean in the left. All right, so one thing now is the depth, and we're gonna use this guy to make to make depth of field, and I'm gonna paste this in the alpha channel. As you can see, it also can be useful to create fog if you want. If you actually use this pass in as like a layer, it could actually give some interesting effects. I mean, who knows, right? Could be cool. As you can see, it's pretty much like a fog. But that's not what we want. What we want is just depth of field. One thing to make sure is to collapse your object with your background, because if you do that, it's gonna blur much better when you use the depth. If you don't do that, if you apply a blur, the blur we're gonna see now on the layer, it's not gonna be as clean as if it was one solid picture with everything. So now what we want is go on the blur and use lens blur. And what lens blur does is it uses the depth as a pass. So here alpha 1 is the alpha that I have, and as you can see, it focuses where I click, which is super handy. Like if I go, I'm like, I want the focus on the head, or I want the focus here, in the back. It just blurs everything accordingly. It's pretty strong. Usually I stay very light, something like, something like 6 on the radius, and then I focus on my subject, which is the head in this case. But as you can see, the horns in the front are a bit blurred, which is really cool, and the back is like nice and smooth. So yeah, very handy. You can also like click on the side if you want kind of like this plane to be sharp, including the head. But yeah, or you can just click directly on the head. So yeah, 6 is pretty good. This doesn't really matter, honestly. 7, it's like the amount of blur. It's pretty standard. All you care here is honestly just the radius. And 6, 7, 8, it's up to you. But I use 6. There you go. So this is a nice blur that I have. And that's pretty much it, guys. It's how I do it. And also the reflection, just for fun. If I paste the reflection here, actually let's go back to this. Yeah, you can have interesting effects. Like if you want something shiny, you can really play with those, and as you can see, it's pretty neat. It's up to you to like play with what effect you want. You don't have to use also like that much brightness, but it's cool. Like, I mean, if you just want the skull to be glossy or whatever, it's a nice trick. I know some people use that a lot with creatures to have some like slimy effects. Yeah, feel free to experiment, test, play with it, and find your own way of presenting everything. Personally, I love to use a specific gray, not this one, but a darker one in all of my renders. I think it's like 42 for me. This one is 43. But yeah, I use always the same kind of gray on all my pictures. But yeah, I think it's really up to you to find your style, what you like, and yeah, have fun. Thanks, guys.